Hey, thank you everyone for coming to today's webinar. Good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, aptly titled Foreign Investments in Cambodia, Legal Compliance and Real Estate Opportunities. This session is hosted by IPS Cambodia in collaboration with Rajah Tann Asia, bringing together legal experts and real estate professionals to share practical insights for ASEAN and international investors interested in Cambodia. As Cambodia continues to attract foreign investment, understanding the country's market trends and foreign property ownership regulations is essential. Today's session aims to provide clear guidance on how investors can navigate these areas and identify promising opportunities. During this webinar, our speakers will discuss Cambodia's market outlook, the legal and tax framework for foreign investors, and investment structuring strategies supported by practical case studies. The audience will have the opportunity to schedule one-on-one consultations with our experts following the session. And I would also like to let you know that there will be a section afterwards for you to submit your questions. Please go to the three dots or ellipses in the Zoom section and go to Q&A to submit your questions so that our hosts and our co-hosts can address you properly. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to an insightful discussion. So to begin our session, we are pleased to welcome James Whitehead, who is the country manager and leads IPS Cambodia's strategic growth and advisory operations. James handles a macro-level overview of Cambodia's property landscape, sharing insights on current investor sentiment, emerging market trends, and regional capital flows shaping the country's real estate sector. Joining him in his presentation, I would also like to introduce Hsu Mon Htut, the Myanmar market lead at IPS Cambodia. Specializing in cross-border advisory, Hsu will share insights into ASEAN and global investor behavior, ownership considerations, property matching strategies, and practical transaction guidance. Their perspectives will help to set the stage for the discussions that will follow later in the webinar. Thank you.
James, thank you. Yeah, cool. So thank you for an excellent introduction, Moni. I'm James Whitehead, the country manager at IPS Cambodia. Just firstly, we're very delighted to work with Rajah Tann Asia on today's webinar, and we look forward to together introducing investors to the Kingdom of Wonder that is, of course, Cambodia. A quick thank you to Hsu, who I know has worked very hard over the last few months to bring together today's event and provide a platform for discussion targeted to ASEAN citizens. A little about myself. Personally, I've lived and worked in Cambodia for over 10 years, and I consider Cambodia my second home. And I'm also a personal investor in the country. As the world changes dramatically in recent periods, and no least recent weeks, we increasingly understand that the Cambodian market offers unique benefits for foreign investors from around the world, seeking personal relocation and the relocation of capital. Geopolitical changes abroad are increasingly positioning Cambodia as a key focus point for foreign investors now and into the coming years. Cambodia is a fast-growing market with clear foreign ownership protections, affordable property, and clear and consistent returns. And it is for these reasons that more and more international buyers are waking up to the opportunities here. However, like any emerging market, there remain risks and pitfalls to avoid in the Cambodian real estate sector, and hence it's extremely important to work with trustworthy and experienced partners in the market. So that leads me to a brief introduction of our company, Independent Property Services Cambodia, better known as IPS Cambodia. So IPS was first started in 2009 by our founder, Australian national Mr. David Murphy, who began living in Cambodia and realised there was a lack of quality independent property services in the market, especially in regard to assisting foreign buyers and renters. Hence, he began IPS with a vision to become a bridge into the market for foreign buyers and renters. Over 15 years later, the vision remains very similar. However, the team has expanded dramatically to almost 100 staff across 2 offices in Phnom Penh and Siem Reap. The market has evolved beyond site since those days, and now IPS services all property and customer types. Our core services include brokerage, growth rentals and sales, valuations for the finance sector and private owners, and feasibility studies for incoming developers. We also have a specialist property management team handling all types of assets for owners seeking hands-off returns. Relevant to the business people joining us today, we are also specialists in placing commercial tenants, whether it be office, warehousing, or commercial land rentals and sales. And for pure investors, IPS offers a full-service suite for international property buyers purchasing in Cambodia, which allow buyers from overseas to be 100% hands-off in their investments. In particular, we specialize in personalized management and leasing services for condos and other assets, maintaining, repairing units, furnishing and snag checking at handover, dealing with building management concerns, lease acquisition and tenants screening, ongoing support for tenants and property checks, handling any tax considerations, financial reporting, and the transfer of net returns to investors' accounts. And of course, the final resale of the unit when it comes time to exit your investment. The IPS difference compared to other agencies in the market is our commitment to trust and integrity, something I will touch on later in the discussion today. But we don't sell anything to our clients that we don't understand, trust, and foresee a positive outcome. In this regard, we have a highly selective approach. This is because we intend to work with our buyers for the entire life cycle of their investment. Hence, there's no point in us offering properties with a poor yield projection or quality issues, as this will only damage our client and our own interests in the coming years. This approach and integrity is why IPS has remained a market leader for almost two decades and will remain the first choice for incoming investors to Cambodia for many years to come. So before Hsu and her team at Rajah Tann Asia begin the substantive topics today, I'd like to set the scene by offering a quick overview of the Cambodian real estate market. On a macro level, Cambodia remains a very attractive destination located at the crossroads of Southeast Asia, which collectively represents the fastest growing economic bloc in the world. Southeast Asia is not only growing in terms of economic output and complexity, but also physically in terms of a swift population growth. Cambodia's population is set to grow more so than most countries in the region due to a highly youthful demographic, the median age in 2026 being just 25 years old. This is a stark contrast to more developed countries around the world where birth rates are stagnating alongside high costs of living and a general lack of economic opportunity. Cambodia also stands out in Southeast Asia due to its clear and consistent laws on foreign ownership, which Hsu and our partners at Rajah Tann will expand on more so in the next sections. We have very low tax considerations. We have US dollar-based investments due to Cambodia's dual currency, meaning investors can buy, sell, and rent in US dollar. And we have easy and accessible visas and long-term residency options for foreigners seeking physical relocation. The country's strong GDP, averaging around 7% in the last decade and a half, is largely driven by a manufacturing base, a base which is driving up the population's incomes and creating real growth in the economy, similar to countries such as neighbouring Vietnam, which I think we all know has been flying in recent years, albeit Cambodia is at an earlier stage of its industrial growth cycle, so there's a lot of room to grow. In the last 15 years, we have also witnessed huge investments into infrastructure, which have improved conditions in Cambodia for both living and commerce dramatically. Factors such as these, alongside long-running political stability, has created a very bright future for Cambodia in the coming decades. In terms of foreign ownership in the Cambodian real estate market, it really began en masse in 2010 when foreign ownership laws were first introduced. At that time, the city was largely flat with no skyline here in Phnom Penh. However, after the floodgates opened, we soon saw rapid growth in the real estate market in urban areas in the decade and a half that followed. The condo law, offering full ownership for units above the ground floor in both residential and commercial developments for foreign buyers, essentially opened the doors to a new wave of developers and end investors. The city of Phnom Penh today, compared to 15 years back, is dramatically different, and 10 years later, there'll be a similar shift forward. Following the initial rush, however, and something we're going to talk about more today, the market has begun to settle and the prices have evened out. So it's fair to say that prices in Cambodia peaked around 2020. And as of 2026, these prices have reconciled down around 30 to 40% since those heights. The reason for this drop is something I will expand on in the following sections. But what that means for investors in 2026 is that they are buying at the correct prices versus yields and demand, and the market is now more in tune with the demand of both international and increasingly local buyers and renters. The buyer demographic in the condo sector, for instance, has shifted considerably from only foreign buyers in the early years, with developers really chasing the low-hanging fruit in terms of higher-priced assets, to a much larger share of local buyers in recent times. More local Cambodians require urban homes in order to work in the downtown, while the land price increases in central Phnom Penh have made central residential plots basically inaccessible for most Cambodians. Entry-level condo investments in Phnom Penh, for instance, start around $50,000 or around 1,200 per square metre, with higher prices for central locations and more premium quality. Meanwhile, through our experience at IPS, managing several hundred units for overseas investors and being the #1 leasing agency in both Phnom Penh and Siem Reap, we are very clear that rental returns on average 6 to 8.5% net annually for such properties. This, alongside significant capital gains on resales, creates a strong return for investors in the market and outweigh the returns that often these investors can now generate in their home markets. So it's an exciting market here in Cambodia and one that we're really delighted to present to new investors from around the world. I'd like to thank everyone for joining the webinar today, and I look forward to chatting more after the event. I'll pass over to Hsu for our next sections. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James, for your introductions and sharing such an insightful overview of the Cambodia real estate market. And good morning, everyone. I am Hsu Mon Htut, the Myanmar market lead at IPS Cambodia, mainly work with the regional investor, especially from Myanmar region, with investment opportunities in Southeast Asia. Today, I will do the next part of our IPS presentation. In this part, we will dive into the buyer mindset, key investment considerations, and the opportunity that makes Cambodia market to an attractive market in Southeast Asia region. And I will also in touch with the practical strategy, which will make the minimum risks and maximum returns for our regional investor. Now, let's start with our first slide for the understanding the Asian buyer mindset. For our experience, Asian investors tend to be very strategic and structured in their approach. They are not usually looking for the short-term speculation. Instead, they focus on long-term value, stable incomes, and capital preservation. When it comes to the property types, most investors prefer condominiums in prime city area. These properties are easier to manage, legally straightforward for foreign ownership, and the ideal for generating the rental income very fast. For family-oriented buyer, growing houses and villas are attractive for family relocations and long-term holding. At the same time, we see the growing interest in the commercial and industrial assets for investors seeking yield and stable cash flow as well. Beyond the property type itself, the service quality is an important too. Our Asian buyers are valued for clear market guidance, transparent pricing, professional investment advice, and reliable rental management. Culturally, we value for the trust and long-term relationship as well. Investors want to work with the reliable advisor who will know about the cross-border purchasing concern like clear and flexible payment plans, structure, currency transfer issue, and capital repatriation as well. And one question came up significantly and consistently. It is the how easy to exit from the investment later. Having a clear strategy for exit can boost the investor to move forward confidently with their investment in the market. Next slide, please. Now, let's talk about the ownership structure in market attractiveness in Cambodia. For foreign investors in Cambodia, strata title condominiums are the most straightforward and secure option. Strata title law, effective since 2010 in Cambodia, provide 100% ownership for foreigners And those units are particularly popular for the stable rental income and long-term capital preservation. In recent years, we've seen that the trustee and long-term lease become popular too. Cambodia trust law, effective since 2019, it is transparent and secure, similar to trust law in the USA or in Singapore. This allows investors to manage their assets with structured approach and secure way and legal clearness as well. For legal guidance, we recommend our legal partner, Rajah Tann Asia, who can ensure your investment are all legally compliant. In terms of location, Phnom Penh City Center is the hotspot for the condominiums and mixed-use office or commercial assets. They are ideal for the rental incomes and capital appreciation. The outskirts and suburban areas are attractive for the tourists and villa for family livings or lifestyle purpose. Meanwhile, the industrial corridors near main roads and infrastructures in industrial zones are attractive for warehouse and industrial assets with strong yield potential. Next slide, please. Now, before making any investment, we have to take what the buyer key considerations and what is the meta moves for the buyer. First, choosing the right developer is more important than just going to get the lowest price. And second is the payment plan clarity and reliable construction timeline. And the next is the strong exit strategy as well. Buying whether for rental or resale, the risk management is the critical as well, especially for the cross-border investment. At the same time, common mistakes are there as well. Many investors focus to choose for the lowest price over the quality, underestimate the delay risks or possible delay, or enter without a clear exit plan. To avoid these risks, with our IPS expertise and Rajah Tann Asia advisory, together with you, you can move forward with more clarity and confidence. The goal is very simple: clear an entry, control all the process, and confidence in your return. Next slide, please. Yes. As Jane mentioned earlier, in Cambodia, rental returns are typically range around 6 to 8% per year, while capital appreciation can progress for 5 to 7% per year. To give you the clear picture of how it was practically, especially in Phnom Penh, we prepared a simple case study with J Tower 2. This project was launched in 2018 in the prime BKK1 area by the very good Japanese developer, Tanichu. It is well known for its strong construction quality, professional management, and spacious layout with spacious two-bedroom layout units, which are very attractive for the expatriate tenants in here. In this example, one of our investors purchased 8 units through IPS in this tower, and it is 2021 when the project was under construction. When the construction was complete in 2023, he held all units and rented them out, and he gets a steadily rental income for all units. Then 2 years later, in 2025, he resold 2 units from this 8 units with good market price. Combining from rental yield and total appreciation, these investors gained approximately $147,000 in US dollar as profit. This example shows that an important principle: early investment in well-located selected projects can generate both rental incomes and capital growth. Project selection is very serious and important, as in Cambodia, not all projects can deliver strong returns or easy exit. At IPS, we differentiate ourselves by conducting through due diligence on each developer and project as well. If a project seems unlikely to generate at least 6% to 8% of yearly ROI, or if the exit options are uncertain, not very clear, we do not recommend this project to our clients. This approach makes sure that our investor access only the high-quality opportunities with minimum risks and maximizing their potential returns. Currently, resale units in gigawatt 2s are very limited because most of the owners tend to be hold for long term to maximize their returns. However, for investors looking for the similar opportunities, we have several strong potential alternatives in market today, such as gigawatt 2, gigawatt 3, by the same developer with the gigawatt 2 offer for the new project with the best opportunity with competitive price for 3-bedroom spacious layout. In Taimongli Garden, a 100% complete premier riverfront condominium developed by the reputed developer OCIC, located at the unique location in Phnom. In Gado, developed by another Japanese management and developer, which will bring the strong Japanese quality, design, and the quality as well. And Odom is a mixed-use commercial and residential project by a very good developer, Urban Living Solution, offer a more integrated lifestyle concept. For anyone interested, you can schedule a one-on-one consultation with IPS with us anytime after the webinar to explore this opportunity together. Next slide, please. And now we discussed about the property, locations, and the return as well. So we talked about another topic, important topics of the tax. There are 3 main taxes in Cambodia property. The first one is the property transfer tax or stamp duty tax, which is payable for 4% of the property value, and it will have to be paid when the ownership is transferred. And the next one is the annual tax on immovable property, TOIP, or property tax. It will calculate on 0.1% of the property value above the 25,000 in US dollar for a year. And another one is the rental income tax, which will be payable depends on the property types and the ownership structure. For detailed tax planning, we recommend our investor to consult with qualified legal advisor, our partner, Rajah Tann Asia. Today, our collaboration with our IPS and Rajah Tann Asia provide an additional layer of safety support to our investor. IPS will focus on the property advisory, including market insight, project selections, and transition coordination. And Rajah Tann act as a recommended legal partner with us, assisting with the legal due diligence, SPA review, and ownership structuring. This approach ensures both commercial and legal perspectives are properly covered. Simple, flexible, and transparent approach. Thank you all for your time and attention. I hope this session gave you the clear picture of how to approach an investment in Cambodia and some practical insights you can take away for your own planning. Your engagement and questions are highly appreciated. It makes really this session more active. And apart of this, for more details and deep dive for the condo investment in Cambodia, our IPS Cambodia will launch the condo investor guide in next week, and we can send this file to you if you are interested in that. So just drop a message in this webinar. And now I will hand the session over to Ms. Moni, our host, who will lead us to the Rajah Tann Sok Heng next session with their main speaker. Thank you all, and over to you, Moni.
Thank you so much, Sue and James, for the insightful overview and for setting the context for today's discussion on Cambodia's ever-evolving property landscape and investment environment. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Sophonnora, or just Nora, and he is the Deputy Managing Partner here at Rajah Tann Sok Heng Law Office, which is the Cambodian regional office of the Rajah Tann Asia network. He is a key legal player in the real estate market here in Cambodia, and he has been consecutively recognized and ranked by reputable legal publications such as Chambers and Partners, IFLR 1000, and Asia Law and Legal 500. Today, he will be sharing valuable insights about real estate transactions for foreign investors. Please welcome him warmly. Thank you.
Thank you, Moni. Let me share screen first. Okay. First, can you all see my screen now? Right. Thanks, Moni, once again for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nora. I'm the Deputy Managing Partner of Rajah Tann Cambodia. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank James and Sue from IPS Cambodia for co-hosting and for the collaboration in making this event happen. And also thanks to them as well for their insightful presentation earlier. Now I will only need to share with you a brief overview on land ownership and land holding from the legal perspective, just to set the stage ahead of our panel discussions. As you all may be aware, Cambodia continues to attract a strong interest, particularly in real estate investment. I hope today's sessions will give you a clearer understanding and more practical insight into Cambodia legal framework on how real estate investment can be structured here. Allow me to walk you through today's agenda quickly. First, I would like to take a bit of time to introduce you of who we are and key services that we provide in real estate transactions. Then I'll share with you a brief historical context of land ownership in Cambodia before examining about land ownership, its restrictions and available exceptions for foreign investor in particular. And finally, we will be hearing more from our speakers in the fireside discussions, which will be moderated by my colleague Min. Okay, Rajah Tann Asia, first about Rajah Tann Asia, it is one of the largest legal network in Asia with over 1,000 fee earners. We service clients in more than 40 practice areas. We have offices across 10 Asian jurisdictions with 3 country-focused desks, Brunei, Japan, and South Asia. What distinguishes our network from others is that we operate with local qualified lawyer in each of the jurisdiction rather than a fly-in, fly-out model. We are proud to call ourselves lawyers who know Asia, as we advise clients on our own backyard with a deep understanding of local legal, regulatory, and cultural realities. In Cambodia, we call ourselves Rajah Tann Sok Heng Law Office. We were established back in 2010. This month of March actually marks our 16th anniversary. We are based in Phnom Penh capital, and we are a duly registered law firm with the Bar Associations of the Kingdom of Cambodia. We are a full-service law firm with 4 active partners and over 20 fee earners. Our team on the ground here is predominantly made up of Cambodian qualified lawyers. We service clients in both transactions and disputes. We are actively involved in some of the most significant transactions in the country, whether it is investment entry, merger acquisitions, or financing. We also regularly advise clients on cross-border transactions, particularly involving regional investors. Specifically in real estate, our team of lawyers are not only very well versed with the law that governs all types of property-related transactions, but also the property market itself. We advise clients across different sectors and guide them through every stage of the transactions. This includes conducting legal due diligence, drafting and negotiating transaction documents, whether it is a sale and purchase agreement or a lease agreement. We also advise clients on land holding structures, as well as handling property conveyance and registrations with land authority in Cambodia. We also assist and advise a client on real estate related licensing and regulatory compliance, as well as property financings and mortgage arrangements. In practice, our role is to ensure that the transactions is not only commercially sound, but also legally enforceable and compliant under Cambodian law. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the topic itself. So in order to understand about land ownership in Cambodia, it is important to understand some historical background. I will try to run you through a high-level important developments, but without delving into too much the technicality of it. As you all may be aware, Cambodia had gone through its darkest period in history during the Khmer Rouge regime between 1975 till 1979, where ownership rights over immovable property were completely abolished. The country's land registry, along with all ownership-related documents and records, were entirely destroyed. Consequently, all recognitions of ownership rights related to immovable properties or land prior to 1979 were renounced. In the wake of the genocidal regime of Pol Pot, Cambodia was established as a Popular Republic of Kampuchea with the adoptions of its 1981 constitutions. At that time, all land belongs to the state, and citizens are only allowed to use the land for residential or farming purpose only. In 1989, the government of Popular Republic of Kampuchea passed an important sub-decree number 25 with two important updates. First update is that all land is the collective property of the people that shall be managed by the state. And the sub-decree re-emphasized that all ownership prior to 1979 were renounced. The second update is that the state will grant the right of ownership over building and the right of occupations and use over land to Cambodian citizens. So these rights were perpetual and could be passed on as successions or transferred to others, provided that they are not foreigners. So this sub-decree was an interesting development, as it was for the first time that Cambodia, to an extent, recognized a separation of right between land and building. However, the separations of land and building has not been further developed and recognized in subsequent legislation efforts. So immediately after the passing of the sub-decree back in April 1989, a new constitution was adopted where the state of Cambodia was established. This 1989 constitution re-emphasized that all land is owned by the state still, and Cambodian citizens are granted with rights of occupancy, which is the possession and use for residential and business purpose. Since then, significant efforts toward Cambodian land reforms and the reconstructions of regulations pertaining to private ownership of immovable properties in Cambodia can be observed, from legal instruments passed from 1989 onward, such as the adoptions of the 1992 land law. In September 1993, the Kingdom of Cambodia was established with the adoptions of the 1993 Constitution, which is our current constitution. So under these constitutions, ownership rights over land by private Cambodian citizens are officially and formally recognized. The constitution states that all persons, individually or collectively, shall have the rights to own property. Only natural persons or legal entity of Khmer nationality shall have the right to own land, and legal private ownership shall be protected by law. So thereafter, in September 2001, a new land law, being the 2001 land law, was adopted to further strengthen the legal regime over the rights of ownership and other rights over immovable properties as guaranteed by the Constitution. And in 2007, the Civil Code, which only came into effect in December 2011 by virtue of the law of its implementation, was adopted. Okay? Although the Civil Code has repealed a major part of the 2001 land law, but legal provisions in relation to the recognitions of possessions and acquisition of ownership over land remain valid and applicable till current date. So in short, private freehold ownership is legally and formally recognized in Cambodia since the constitutions of 1993. However, such ownership is exclusive and reserved only for Cambodian citizens. With these restrictions embedded in our constitution and law, it means foreigners are not allowed to have legal ownership over land. This means foreigners cannot directly own immovable property, being land, outright. That said, there are a few important exceptions. First, with regards to co-owned building, or commonly known as condominium. Since 2010, with the top adoptions of important law, as both James and Sue have also earlier alluded, foreigners have been permitted to own private units in co-owned building for both residential and commercial purpose under strata title. However, there are conditions attached to it. First, the private unit must be located above ground floor, meaning that it has to be detached from the land itself. Second, the co-owned building itself must be located more than 30 kilometers from a land border. And third, the total foreign ownership ratio in the co-owned building itself must not exceed 70% of the total private unit areas in the building. The second exceptions, so-called exceptions, with regard to land and landed property, even though there is an express restrictions of foreign ownership in place, structures can be put in order to accommodate foreign indirectly acquiring and participating in land ownership. These include landholding companies where legal ownership is held by a Cambodian company and foreign investors can hold up to 49% shares in such company. Second structure would be to put in place a trust arrangement with licensed trustee who are supervised and regulated by the trust regulator. I will not be talking too much on this structure, as I believe James and Sue have earlier touched upon it a little bit as well. And next, it will be discussed and examined further in the panel discussions. Meanwhile, if foreign investor do not actually look to own the land itself, but to only occupy and use it for their business operation purpose, they may also consider leasehold rights or concession rights, which can be commercially attractive depending on the project and the investment horizons. Leasehold rights that is available to foreign investor can be in the form of long-term lease of up to 50 years and renewable, while concession rights are more appropriate for large-scale economic or social development projects, such as agriculture, mining, or infrastructure. It is important, however, to note that each structure carries different risks, control, and compliance considerations, and must be carefully assessed. I believe my colleagues will touch on this more during their discussions in the fireside chat at the end of the presentations. Now, let's look into the different types of title currently in existence in Cambodia. As previously shared to you, Cambodia land registries, along with all the ownership-related documents and records, were entirely destroyed during the Pol Pot regime. Right. So in 2002, the government has adopted a sub-decree number 46 to kickstart the re-establishment of the land registries for the country. The Ministry of Land, Urban Planning and Constructions of Cambodia, or we call in short Ministry of Land, is vested with the power to maintain the registry and has the authority over the land registration process, including the issuance of the land ownership title, which is currently the certificate of ownership over the immovable property. It is also commonly known as the LMAP title. LMAP is an abbreviation term for Land Management and Administration Project, which is a World Bank supported land registration project carried out by the Ministry of Land to create a secure, systematic land registration system with clear boundaries using GPS coordinates. For these reasons, the land re-registration itself has been a work in progress since 2002. And recently, I believe the Ministry of Land has provided an update that the process of land registration itself is almost complete and is expected to be fully wrapped up within the next 1 or 2 years. So this is the reason why we have situations of different types of title currently. You may very well have heard of the term soft title and hard title. So they are actually not the legal terminology, but rather colloquial term used in practice. So the first picture on the left is a sample of a soft title. Soft title lands are referred to lands that have not been properly demarcated and registered into the national system yet. They are generally land that is evidenced by various types of documents that are issued by local authorities to provide certain proof of physical possessions or occupations over a particular parcel of land. The second picture in the middle is a sample of the hard title itself. So when we refer to a hard title land, we means for those land whose boundaries have already been demarcated with clear GPS coordinates and registered into the ministry system. And the latest format of LMAP certificate also comes with the QR code too. The third picture on the right is a sample of a certificate of strata title, which applies to private units in a co-owned building. The strata title is also considered as the so-called hard title as well. So with this overview in mind, I hope it would be useful and thought-provoking for you when following our colleagues' fireside discussions, where they will be sharing more practical insights from actual real estate transaction itself, common pitfalls that we normally see among foreign investors, and how these risks can be managed in practice. So as always, we lawyers always like to end our slide presentations with a disclaimer as a reminder to our audience. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Please feel free to stay connected with us through LinkedIn or reach out to us directly if you have any questions after today's sessions. Moni, back to you.
Thank you so much, Nora, for your insightful presentation. So I will now move on to the fireside chat segment of our webinar, where we will explore these topics further through a discussion on market opportunities, investor perspectives, and practical experiences in Cambodia's real estate sector. We have an excellent panel discussion organized for you today, and the session will be moderated by our regional legal advisor, Min, who will guide the discussion and engage our speakers in a deeper dialogue on the key themes raised during today's session. Min, I will now hand this over to you as our moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Moni. I hope everyone can hear me well. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, just would like to echo Nora's sentiment as a thanks to the IPS team for organizing this. We really, truly appreciate this. We have an excellent panel discussion for you today. I would like to run through the panelists prior to moving on to the queries. But first and foremost, my name is Min. I am a regional legal advisor from Rajah Tann Singapore, and I'm currently based in our Cambodian office to explore regional opportunities. With that being said, we'll hand the mic over to the IPS team for quick introductions.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm James Whitehead, Country Manager at IPS. I have a background in law and humanities, and I've been living in Cambodia for over 10 years and working in the real estate sector for about the same amount of time as Hsu.
Yes, I'm Hsu Mon Htut, and I'm now at the Myanmar market lead at IPS Cambodia, especially for the regional investor, especially from Myanmar, bringing the real estate opportunities from Southeast Asia to those investors.
Thank you, IPS team. I would like to hand the mic over to our colleagues from Rajah Tann as well for a quick introductions, please.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm Khine from Rajah Tann Singapore. I'm originally from Myanmar, but I'm based in Singapore and I practice Singapore law. The reason I'm here today, even though, it's not about Singapore per se, is because in Rajah Tann Asia, we work together as one team, even though we have offices all over Southeast Asia. So we do work very closely with our colleagues in Cambodia office as well in order to come together and support with structuring of different types of projects. Of course, we're not just talking about acquisition of property in Cambodia, but we're also talking about structuring considerations. How do we then make sure that next time when you have investment opportunities available, how do we then prime ourselves in order to receive those foreign investments in the future? So that's really the angle that we are coming from. And pleasure to meet everyone. And thank you once again for having me over at the webinar today.
Thank you, Kai. Perhaps Navinth, you can do a quick intro.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me fine. My name is Navinth, and I'm currently a senior associate at Rajah Tann Cambodia. I primarily work with Sophonnora. I work in the real estate practice group, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the IPS team as well as the audience for taking the time to attend this seminar. And I hope that we will have a fruitful discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Navinth. Without further ado, maybe we'll dive into the questions. Thank you again for the speakers, for your insights. It really sets up the stage for our discussion today. And I'll direct my first question to the IPS team, perhaps Sue, on why do you think Cambodia is the market to go right now? And we've heard a lot about Cambodia being an attractive destination. Maybe you can give some thoughts on why it is.
Thanks for your question, James. And for me, I believe that Cambodia is one of the most attractive emerging markets in Southeast Asia because of its investor-friendly policies and structures and the stable economic growth. One key factor is the legal structure. Before we mentioned a lot, as well, we mentioned a lot. This is the foreign ownership in Cambodia, like strata title, which the 100% ownership for the foreigner to buy a property in here, and the trust structure, which provide a secure and legal framework to manage their investment in here. That structure giving the investor to strong confidence in their investment inside the country. And another point is that Cambodia offers a very open and friendly environment for the visa in here for the foreigner, like long-term visa and the renewable residency option, very easy for the foreigner, investor, retired person, expatriate or professional, anyway, come and live and stay, work and stay inside the country. And for my personal experience, I'm originally from Myanmar, and before I moving to Cambodia, I live and work in Thailand, Bangkok for 2 years. So compared to that experience, in Cambodia, the visa process and the living arrangement is very straightforward and very easy. Since I relocated here in 2024, first I initially lived as an individual self-employed, and later after joining to the IPS, I had to transit my visa to enter company names and the work permit as well. This process is very straightforward, smooth, and minimum of complication as well. And right now I live with the 1-year business visa, which is easily renewable with the work permit, valid work permit as well. So this shows that how accessible to get a long stay visa as a foreigner and working here, and for the investor as well in Cambodia. And from the economic perspective as well, Cambodia is legally dollarized. Cambodia economy is legally dollarized here. property transactions, every investment transactions, even the rental incomes are commonly conducted with the US dollar. So the foreign investor no need to worry a lot about the currency exchange rates in here. And the next point is the market. The market is still growing, so it's overall very competitive entry price with a good rental yield and expected to get the capital growth as well. Well-located condominiums in Cambodia typically generate 6 to 8% rental yields and expected to more gain for the capital growth as well. And timing as well. So entering into the market with the right stage and good location, best project, an investor can position himself ahead to the market growth. In short, Cambodia offers for growth potentials and accessible and welcoming to the foreign investor, and I think these points are attractive to the regional investor. It's a regional investor compared to the regional country. Thank you.
Thank you, Masu. Very excellent points. I believe for an emerging market, this sort of considerations are definitely attractive for any investor. But perhaps, want to pivot a little bit to James. When we think of Cambodia, we think of Phnom Penh as the economic capital. Do we see any opportunities in other regional areas of Cambodia, such as Siem Reap, Sihanoukville comes to mind as well, and also less well-known spots such as Kampot or Kep, which are quickly developing these days?
Yeah, it's a great question. So certainly Phnom Penh remains the first choice for investors seeking clear and consistent rental returns, given it is the economic and political centre of the nation, and it's seeing the fastest urban spatial expansion of pretty much any capital city in the world right now. So most economic opportunities are centred in Phnom Penh, and this is dragging populations from the provinces and obviously international investors firstly to Phnom Penh. However, having said that, we're also seeing growing demand for other major destinations in Cambodia, driven by quite different dynamics. So firstly, in terms of Siem Reap, the market remains extremely popular for expat investors seeking properties for living, whether it be retirement, digital nomads, or those looking to start hospitality-related businesses. It's also a very strong point for agricultural investments. The market in Siem Reap continues to attract investors seeking high-quality landed villas using trust holding in the case of foreigners, which allows strong rental incomes or idyllic homes for living. Meanwhile, due to the height restrictions in Siem Reap around the temples of Angkor Wat, basically developers, they can't build higher than the temples. So they need to focus on low-rise developments, which obviously create tighter margins for developers. So the condo market currently in Siem Reap has a very small supply. The small supply of low-rise condominiums with strata title for foreign ownership has meant that the existing projects in Siem Reap have performed very highly for early investors, and the resale and rentals market remains highly profitable for early entry buyers there. Siem Reap currently needs more supply for housing, such as condos and high-quality villas, and that's something that the IPS team is really working hard on in 2026. And demand from incoming foreign buyers currently outweighs supply. We expect to see some new launches in Siem Reap in 2026 to satisfy this demand. Given the strong tourism profile of Siem Reap, the market appears guaranteed to see continued growth and attention in the coming years, even though current tourism numbers are certainly short of their former glory. However, I think the situation is being felt globally since COVID, and the midterm outlook remains positive for Siem Reap thanks to the worldwide fame of the temples of Angkor and the peaceful and idyllic vibe that the city certainly offers. IPS has an office in Siem Reap, and it's the leading agency in the city since we started over 15 years ago. We are very proud to be a key part of the province's growth story over the last 2 decades, and we will certainly remain the market expert in Siem Reap moving forward. So by all means, we are ready to support investors targeting Templetown. Sihanoukville, on the other hand, has experienced a roller coaster history of real estate development, it's fair to say. This is due to the casino and gambling sector's strong influence on the market there, which we saw rapid growth from around 2015 to 2022. The city really changed dramatically in Sihanoukville. You only had to do a quick Google search on before and after to see the massive boom that occurred there. But outside of gambling, The city also has a very strong manufacturing base due to its close proximity to the Sihanoukville port. Tourism also remains a pillar of the economy in Sihanoukville due to the city's white sand beaches and close proximity to the nation's islands. But as of 2026, Sihanoukville is actually seeing signs of recovery in the property sector, although prices have reduced around 50% from what we saw in 2020. So prices have definitely come down. However, the confidence from both buyers and developers is certainly on the rise again. We've seen several condos and land and house or BORE projects launched in the last 6 months, 1 year, and we've seen very, very fast sales cycles for these properties. So we expect to see more launches in Sihanoukville this year, and certainly the outlook looks very strong moving forward. This has really been supported by a government initiative to clean up the gambling and tourism sector in Sihanoukville, which has had a few controversies over the last couple of years. And we believe that these sort of things are being resolved, and the market will certainly come right in the mid to long term. Several new launches that we've witnessed in Sihanoukville last year are actually, like I said, have moved very quickly. And we're also seeing trends that a lot of Cambodian investors prefer to buy in Sihanoukville because of the above market rental returns offered by Chinese, Indonesian, and other expatriate tenants. High-end branded hospitality vendors, five-star hotels, are also increasingly setting up operations in Sihanoukville, preparing for future demand in the luxury tourism sector. Korong 2, which is a nearby island from Sihanoukville, is also seeing much heightened interest in the last year from investors and hospitality vendors. Hence, the mid to long-term outlook for Sihanoukville remains very positive, with plenty of room for price growth given the current prices compared to what we saw a few years ago. Outside of Siem Reap and Sihanoukville, Kampot and Kep continue to grow in popularity for those seeking affordable and peaceful living in Cambodia. And currently it's one of the most popular locations for retirees looking to make the most of modest pensions. Living costs and rentals in Kampot and Kep are much lower than cities like Phnom Penh or Siem Reap or Sihanoukville, and the land remains highly affordable. However, there's a general shortage of high-quality housing, whether it be apartments or landed homes, especially compared to more asset-rich rural areas like Siem Reap. So the infrastructure is more limited in Kampot and Kep. I mean, for some things like healthcare and other amenities, it remains insufficient compared to hubs like Phnom Penh or Sihanoukville. However, many investors are influenced by the region's charm, the quiet and idyllic way of life there, and the proximity to the coast. It also offers a real potential for growth and will remain a destination to watch in the longer term. Over to you, man.
Thank you, James. Very, very insightful responses. For someone who's living in Phnom Penh and has been to the rural parts of Cambodia, I do agree that it's super idyllic and would be perfect for anybody looking to have a peaceful life. I hope that IPS continues to work closely with developers and try to develop these areas for foreign investors as well. But that being said, of course, with rural developments comes with uncertainty, which are soft titles that we see in the market. So I would like to direct my question to Navinth. With these soft titles, is this still a viable investment for investors? Is the risk appetite too high? And how could one go about restructuring the transaction so that these risks are mitigated for the investors?
Thanks, Min. Thanks for the question. Before going into directly answering your question, we have to understand the government's current push to standardize land registration. So currently, the government is nearing its final goal in registering land, meaning soft titles will eventually be converted into hard title. So the simple answer to your question, and I would assume that most investors would have a lower risk tolerance. The simple answer is that the investment into soft title carries quite a high risk. And however, if certain investors still insist on purchasing soft title land, I would advise that first, the the investor shall ensure that an extensive due diligence has been carried out. So extensive due diligence would comprise ensuring that there is a genuine ownership, the seller, and the person whose name is on the title matches. Basically, it's the same person. And the investor himself shall also ensure that the land is not being used as collateral, as well as to ensure that there is no standing dispute. And also, investors can also carry out physical checks of the land to ensure that there is no border encroachment, as well as to ensure that there is proper road access to the land. So these are some of the points that we look for when we carry out due diligence. And another main point in terms of structuring the purchase of soft title property, investors can protect and ensure a certain level of certainty by requiring that the seller would convert the soft title land into hard title. And this is structured in phased or staggered payments. Investors would start out with making, let's say, 20% deposit. And then the seller will have to carry out the obligation of processing the documents and upgrading the soft title into hard title. And then another phase of payment will come in. And then the seller would process the transfer to the name of the investor himself, and then the final payment can be made. So these are certain things that can be done to mitigate the risks.
Thank you, Navinth. I believe we call that condition precedent in our legal field as well. So good to know for the audience. But perhaps maybe I will move on to Khine, on the same topic. You've done a lot of transactions from a regional facing perspective into Cambodia. So from your perspective as a regional lawyer, what are some of the red flags that you would be looking out for in this sort of deal?
Thank you. So I think we have to take a little bit of a step back and understand when you are trying to acquire property or acquire land, right? Is this part of a bigger transaction, or is land one of the assets that we are looking at as part of a bigger transaction? So the scope of the due diligence itself will naturally be different depending on what the broader context of the transaction is. But maybe for purposes of this discussion, I'll just highlight perhaps the sort of top 3 concerns that we typically look out for, because 3 is an easy number to remember, right? So first, that would be the structure of the land ownership. How is it actually being held? Is it being held by an individual? Is it being held by, I think we've heard before, land holding company, or is it being held by a trust structure? Because the way in which it is currently held would also determine, 1, who the seller is, who are you supposed to be dealing with? Are you dealing with someone that is actually authorized to undertake this transaction? And 2, the structure in which you acquire it as well. So for instance, if it's already in the form of a land holding company, you might instead be looking at acquiring that company instead of directly acquiring the land, because it already comes with a certain structure in place, especially if that land holding structure already has a foreign investor in place. You're basically going to be taking over that structure, assuming, of course, that everything is fine and due diligence doesn't throw up any red flags on that particular land holding company. But of course, if the seller is an individual, then you are also concerned with their solvency, right? Are they solvent? If you've paid them the money one day, next day, the last thing you want is that the liquidator come back and claw back the asset from you. That can't be the case. Or that the liquidator says, you've been sold this property at an undervalue, right? So there are all these considerations that we'll have depending on who the seller is and what the current structure is like. So that's number 1. Number 2, that would be the exact nature of the business that's being undertaken on that property. I think when we talk about property, it's easy to think of a empty plot of land or unoccupied premises, right? But the reality is that maybe what you're looking at already has a business being operated on that premises. In which case, then you will also be looking at, is this business something that is a licensable activity? And if so, then is it something that is subject to any foreign ownership restrictions? Is it something you can continue to carry on after you've taken over the land? And maybe then the transaction structure sort of shifts from acquiring of land to acquiring of business, of which land is one of the assets. So that's number 2. Number 3, we're really looking at, I think the previous speakers have also briefly mentioned about the title, right? So of course, we are looking at how strong is your title, or whoever that claims that they own this land and are able to sell you this land. What is it that they have? Do they have ownership? Do they have right to use? Or is what they have a lease agreement, a concession agreement, in which case the nature of the interest that they have would be certainly very different from what an owner would have. So these are some of the things that we have to look out for when it comes to reviewing the desktop due diligence, on top of course, looking at the land, undertaking physical inspections of the land. One more aspect that one might also look at is the property currently being leased out? If it is currently subject to a tenancy, is the buyer going to buy subject to a tenancy? If so, then of course, reviewing that tenancy agreement would also form part of the due diligence on this property. Reason being that if you as the buyer is going to take over this lease, you need to know what the previous landlord has committed themselves to. Is this something that you can terminate the lease agreement the moment you take over? What is the notice period? Is it 1 month, 2 months? And depending on that, makes a lot of difference in terms of your plans. If you wanted to start your business right after you acquire the property, buying subject to tenancy, where the tenancy's notice period is relatively long, might not be very ideal, in which case then you might want to put the obligation on the seller to then procure that they go ahead and terminate the tenancy agreement first before you buy over. So again, conditions precedent that we mentioned earlier, right? So these are some of the things that we'll be watching out for. So top 3, 1, land holding, ownership and structure. 2, are there any sort of business activities, regulated activities being carried out? And 3 is in terms of the land document, land interests documents. Last one, I think this is a bonus we might want to also mention, is of course the financing aspects. How is this property currently being financed? Is it by way of bank loans? Is it by way of developer financing? And if so, then is the property subject to any encumbrance? For instance, is there a mortgage? Is there someone else who might have a better title than you if you were to buy over? Right? So these are some of the things that we will also consider as part of the due diligence. And that's where we, as together, Rajah Tann Asia, work together with our colleagues in Cambodia to undertake these due diligence. Because, like I said, we come from Singapore where things will be, again, very different. Looking into another country, still very different. So that's where we have this, working together as one team so that as clients, you don't have to deal with 2 separate sets of counsels. Yeah.
Thank you, Kai. Yeah, it's good to hear about the end-to-end process that we take in due diligence proceedings. Especially with the expertise that you get from Singapore on documentations, and also the practical aspects of due diligence that Navinth has highlighted. But perhaps I want to move back to IPS on the due diligence part as well. Because what we do as lawyers is very basically limited to legal due diligence. And there's also commercial and financial due diligence aspects to be undertaken on these properties. Especially I've seen a recent report that shows that, there's a lot of projects completed in Cambodia. There's around 64,000 available units currently available. And now the investors are moving towards quality over quantity. In this regard, James, perhaps you can answer for us what you would consider as a unit with proper quality, and how can investors ensure to maintain this quality before they purchase?
Yeah, well, I totally agree that there's a lot of variation within the market. And I think here at IPS, it's caused us This variation has always caused us to take a very cautious approach to the condo sector, as we can see in the market that the motive of developers has traditionally differed quite dramatically within the market, and the final outcome of projects can be quite distant from the perception of the market in the pre-sale phases. So as a long-running and trusted brand here in Cambodia, it was really not worth our reputation to represent projects that may ultimately damage our clients' interests in the early years of the condo market's growth. So literally in the early years of the off-plan sales in the Cambodian condo market, say 2012 through 2020, IPS sold no condos that were under construction or being purveyed by developers with no track record in the market. This is because we're unsure if our clients would see the promised returns in terms of cap gains and rental income. This decision to remain cautious in the early years was ultimately vindicated, as many of the early projects had not seen the projected capital gains and the rental incomes have differed dramatically between developers. In the worst cases, these projects have defaulted completely or defaulted on their promised guaranteed returns for investors. So now in 2026, we can be quite certain which projects have the best chance of profit for our buyers by examining the previous completed projects by the best performing developers in the market. For new buyers entering the condo market, it's extremely important to do full due diligence on the product by examining developers' previous builds in detail in terms of cap gains for resellers, the rental returns, and the ongoing state of occupancy and property management. We do this on the ground. There's no guesswork involved in this when the projects are complete. While many developers offer a lack of care in Cambodia in terms of property management, others have built a very strong track record, able to be trusted, and providing clear and consistent returns post-handover. Management quality is still a major concern and an area that the market needs a lot of improvement. Honestly speaking, there's a lot of developers who build without any thought about what's going to happen when the project completes. And this is a problem, and these are not projects that investors should be targeting. However, here at IPS, we select development partners who have developed clear, consistent management results, which maintains the value of the properties within and ensures clear rental demand. Through our property management division, we have very clear insight into this area of the market. So essentially, we only focus on projects that we can trust based on an ongoing relationship with those developers and a witness to their success in market. Meanwhile, we continue to avoid new entrants into the market who haven't got a clear performance record we can demonstrate to our buyers. There is also, touching on your question a little bit more, man, we understand there's a distinct oversupply in terms of centrally located units, especially smaller units, studio and one bedroom. So I know that there's a lot of agencies in Cambodia pushing studio and one bedroom units into the region, promising very high returns. However, in fact, this is not true. The reason for this is during the boom period, there was a preference for smaller units by Chinese developers and end buyers, I guess because they wanted to create a smaller entry point for the investor. And by doing so, this has pushed the yields for the studio and the one bed in the prime areas down to around 3 to 5% only. And in some cases, it's worse than that. So here at IPS, in the more oversupplied areas, we're much more focused on larger units, 2 bedrooms plus, because these types of units still remain in stronger demand due to a less supply. I guess traditionally, in terms of expat renters and also Cambodian renters, before there was a lot more opportunity to rent villas in the downtown areas. However, as time's gone on and the city's grown, these villas have been redeveloped into high-rise or retail venues. So the option now for downtown renters is the condominium sector. So we look to offer larger units which have better yield potential. Not to say that smaller units are not always profitable. For us, we focus on smaller units in the growing districts of Phnom Penh, where the supply still has room to grow, and we're seeing heightened demand in those areas for smaller units. The other thing about smaller units is because of the lower price points in terms of purchasing and renting, it's increasingly becoming applicable to both Cambodian and international buyers, and Cambodian and international renters, and ultimately for your resale. So there is a market there, but you better make sure that you buy at the right price. For us, I know it's kind of cliche, but investors still must target quality compared to price when they can. And they should look to prime and fast-growing locations with limited supply and high demand, and developers that have proven they deliver what they promise, because there's a lot of developers in Cambodia who do not deliver what they promise. We always aim to ensure our buyers to buy at a price which allows a minimum of a 15% capital gain, at least in the first 5 years, and ideally more. Thus, based on the purchase price, we want to see our investors achieve a rental asset that's able to achieve at least 6% net and up to 8.5% net. These are reasonable and achievable outcomes for pure investors in the market, buying through IPS and taking into account the costs of management, for us managing for them throughout the investment cycle. We currently manage and maintain over 200 units for overseas clients, dealing with all necessary works and furnishing, something I mentioned earlier, maintenance, lease acquisition, and so on. So given we work with investors throughout the life cycle of their investments, we have no interest in selling unrentable products. That's all from me, man.
Thank you so much, James. Super insightful. I think it's good to see a perspective of due diligence that's not legal. And, I'm glad to hear that IPS can give such services to incoming investors so that they can be comforted. Perhaps, since we've talked a little bit about the due diligence and pre-purchase, maybe we can move on to the actual, how transactions work. Before we dive into the structures and, holdco structures in Singapore, perhaps I can direct a question to Sue. A little bit more on a simplified version of what James just said. What sort of units would you recommend to incoming investors, right? What are you guys seeing the strongest rental returns in terms of numbers? Is it the mid-range condos? Is it the affordable housing, or any other types of investments available?
Thanks for your question, Khine. And as James mentioned before, in Cambodia, different property types are evolving for the different returns in different ways everywhere. And for rental and capital group, affordable housing demand is strong with the growing urban populations and young professionals, and industrials and logistics as well. They also gain the momentum with the growth of e-commerce and supply chains. But from my perspective, the condominiums in Phnom are the most attractive option for the both rental incomes and the capital appreciation. They are attractive for professionals and the international profession moving to Cambodia and company as well. Tenants prefer modern condominiums with good facility, securities, and in central location. Well-located project with the reputable developers typically sure to get the solid rental returns and potentially for long-term capital growth. Let's say compared to my hometown country, Yangon, hometown city, in Yangon market, the rental return is very limited, and also the yield as well are very lower. So Cambodia is outstanding in that point as well. So especially the Phnom condominium for every range with the qualified developer, quality management, provides stable incomes, and we can get the potential gain for the capital growth as well, as you mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Masu. Thank you. Okay, I think then we can move on to how to structure the transaction itself. Perhaps Khine, you mentioned about having put in place a holdco in Singapore. Maybe could you touch base a little bit on, what are the advantages, and why would someone consider setting up such a structure in Singapore or any of the regional hubs to invest into Cambodia?
Sure. So basically, I think when we talk about acquiring a property, we are sort of focusing on only the asset itself, right? But the reality is that the asset may be part of your bigger business strategy, in which case then we need to think of how exactly are we going to be benefiting of the different sort of incentives that are available throughout the different parts of the region. And fortunately for us, this region is now in one of the better states right, at the current present moment. So in terms of having a holding company structure, it's not just to have it as a holding company, but it is also possible that you operate also in that country, of course, subject to whether there are any foreign ownership restrictions in the sector that you are looking at. But assuming that there isn't, of course, you can also undertake that particular company as an operating company. Holding company is also possible, meaning that the holding company in turn holds the shares in the subsidiary in, say, Cambodia, which in turn owns the land. Why might that be something that is feasible? So in the course of your operations, subsequently, you might be looking at more foreign investments down the road, right? And it's always easier for someone else coming in from, let's say, outside of the region to look at, okay, where should I go and invest? And if they are someone that's not so familiar with the region, it's always good to have somewhere like Singapore, which sort of offers a middle sort of position between someone that is not familiar to the region versus someone who is super familiar with the region, right? So it's that sort of being primed in order for you to receive further investments down the road. And of course, it's also possible to structure your holding company in a way that allows you better economic interests and also control over the assets in the operating companies. So for instance, if let's say ownership is really not possible, what's the next best alternative? It's economic interest and control, right? And in terms of how do we structure that, we could look at having potentially different classes of shares for one of the shareholders to get better economic returns and better control over how the companies are being run. And that company in turn is the one that has interest over the land. So that's one of the aspects that we could look at in terms of structuring. In terms of exit options as well, that's also another option that we can consider. So instead of selling the property in Cambodia versus selling a company in Cambodia versus selling shares in a Singapore company. So you can have different possible exit structures if next time, 5 or 10 years down the road, if that's what you foresee as the life cycle of your investment. So it's really more of thinking ahead that, in order to facilitate all these future undertakings that you might do, you might potentially also want to consider exploring the region as a whole.
Thank you, Khine. Very insightful. I agree completely because because of the foreign ownership restrictions surrounding land, and land is usually the most attractive investment for any investors, especially for businessmen doing manufacturing or other sectors. This would be a very good safeguard for them in order to protect their interests and park it under Singapore. But however, I want to also direct a question to Navinth on the trust structure that recently came into effect in 2019 in Cambodia. This is essentially a way for foreigners to own land through a trustee. So perhaps you can shed some light on how the structure works and how it is regulated under Cambodian law.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Min. So how does the trust structure works? So it first starts with the truster, the investor, identifying the trustee, trustee selection. The truster himself, the investor himself, have to select a licensed trustee. And upon identifying the suitable trustee, both parties will have to enter into what we call a trust deed. And this document must define the passive nature of the trustee and specify the exclusive rights to instruct on sales and leases. And I would like to take this opportunity as well to talk a little bit on the trust deed. The investor has to ensure that the trust deed is watertight. There are 3 main points I can say. First, the investor has to ensure that the management and control of the trust property is maintained. Basically, the trustee cannot manage or control the property without the consent of the beneficiary. For example, for cases like leasing the property or selling off the property. And another point is to be clear about when the trust shall come to an end. And another clause also to be considered is how can the investor, if he so chooses, transfer the trust to another licensed trustee. And one last point would be fees, the trust fee. There must be transparency in that. And going back to how the trust is set up, upon a trust deed being signed, both parties shall authenticate the trust deed by a notary public. And the next step would be asset transfer, the fund injections. So upon concluding the trust deed, funds must be transferred, and then the trustee himself will have to go ahead and process the transaction, the property transaction, and the property will be registered under the name of the trustee. And how is this? Because in Cambodia we have a trust authority, so investors can have peace of mind. The trust deed must be registered. Upon authentication, it must be registered with the trust authority within 3 months of signing. And upon approval, the authority will issue a certificate of trust registration. And this certificate has a validity of period of 5 years, and it is renewable. So this is how a trust is set up in Cambodia.
Thank you, Navinth. Seems to me that the trust deed will be the key document that anybody should, closely look at prior to entering into a trust arrangement. I would like to move on to the exit options, but perhaps before moving on that, just one question on fund remittance, because you mentioned it briefly as well. When you do investments into another country, naturally the first thing that you have to do is move your funds into said country. In this regard, does Cambodia has any approval requirements from the National Bank of Cambodia or any of the other ancillary steps that the investor would have to take in order to move their funds legally into the kingdom?
Thanks, Min. That's also a very important question. Assuming the investor is an offshore entity, right? Currently, there is no requirements imposed by the NBC. Bearing in mind that the banking sector in Cambodia is quite liberal. So any requirements as far as compliance is concerned would be imposed by the originating country. However, I would say that the seller, the person receiving the funds in Cambodia might have to prepare certain documents ready. If it is a purchase of property, then it would be the SPA, the sales and purchase agreements. And if the seller is a corporate entity, then corporate resolutions would also be required. However, in Cambodia, banking sector, banking institutions has the obligation to make reports to the NBC for any transfer amount of $100,000 or more. But this is the obligation of the banking institution and not on the sender or the receiver.
Thank you, Navinth. It's good to know about the liberal nature of Cambodian's banking sector. I think it's one of the perks that will attract investors as a destination. Okay, I think then, now we've talked about the transaction, we've talked about due diligence. Perhaps we can talk a little bit about exit. First, I would like to direct a question to the IPS team to answer, or the realistic time on market. We hear a lot of words called short or long investments, flippings. What kind of investment structure and gestation period would be suitable for Cambodia? And perhaps you can share your insights on how past exits have been conducted in this regard.
For the exit strategy, the real estate market in Cambodia, the realistic time on market depends on the property types, location, developer, and the pricing. Well-located condominium units with qualifying developer, qualifying management can usually take 3 to 6 months if priced correctly. Units near business hubs, business districts, schools, shoppings, and lifestyle hubs can move faster and sell faster because they can attract more buyers. More resale buyers are individual buyers, and sometimes in Cambodia, the institutional buyers or bulk buyers can happen too. But the market time on market will take around 6 to 8 months. Depends on the factor I mentioned above. Pricing is very critical. Even a high quality unit can stay longer on the market if the price is too high. Well priced unit can sell very fast. And short-term flipping is also possible in Cambodia as well. But generally, 5 to 8 years of holding periods is recommended to maximize the both rental incomes and capital appreciation as well. For example, buying a condo in 30% of its construction progress, and it can allow for get the very good entry price, and get the benefits from the growth as well. When hand over the project, the property may appreciate 20 to 25% capital appreciations, and later the rental income can generate 6 to 8% per year as well. So total return for 5 years can gain minimum 40% if they choose the right project in right location. And holding for 8 years long is very good for higher returns and higher gain as well. So in summary, the successful exit depends on choosing the right project and right developer, and setting the pricing, optimal price and time, and understanding the buyer base as well, or the individual buyers or the bulk buyer.
Thank you, Masu. Very insightful. Perhaps to touch a little bit on the legal aspects, we are aware that exit will largely look similar to purchasing because the steps are essentially the same. So I wouldn't ask about this question anymore. Perhaps I'll move on to Khine and talk more about the exit from a perspective of a holdco in Singapore. How does one go about achieving it?
Sure. So I think when we are talking about exit structure, again, we need to think of how it was previously structured, right? And then are we dealing with it in the form of selling of shares in a company? Are we thinking of selling of assets of a particular company? Obviously, one key aspect that a lot of the sellers are concerned about is also stamp duty and capital gains tax, right? Whether selling of shares would attract more stamp duty compared to selling of that asset. And it really depends on the stamp duty laws of the particular jurisdiction that you're looking at. And also, of course, if you are selling the asset, there are certain foreign ownership restrictions when it comes to particular assets. So we also have to be mindful of that. And the next aspect that a lot of the sellers also need to be mindful of is when you are exiting, are you exiting from the business as a whole? And if that business is something that is a regulated business, then you also need to manage the exit process also with the regulators. And that's where, again, we work together with our colleagues on the ground, right? And obviously, because being on the ground, there's nothing like it in terms of engaging with the regulator. So that's also one aspect that one needs to be concerned with, because ultimately it's not as easy as, okay, I've sold my shares and I've left. It's also dealing with one, responsible exit, two, transition to, for example, the next business owner that takes over, transition in terms of your customers, transition in terms of your employees, transition in terms of the other ancillary parts of your assets, right? So those are some of the things that we'll also be looking at in terms of exit options.
Thank you, Kai. It's very clear. And I'm very glad that you touched on the tax part as well. To our audience, we're not doing a tax seminar, so we won't go too much into detail, but just to highlight that, in Cambodia, there's been some developments with capital gains tax. So please have a look out for our client updates in this regard so that you can be fully informed. Going back to the topic at hand, Navinth, perhaps I can ask you a little bit more on how to exit a trust arrangement. Thanks.
Thanks, Min. So how do we go about exiting a trust arrangement? This ties back to my previous answer. First, we need to ensure that the trust deed is watertight. So when a buyer is identified, the beneficiary can instruct the trustee to dispose of the property. And then the trustee will go ahead and execute the sale, the sales document. And the trustee will have to collect the sale proceeds and deposit it into a trust account for the benefit of the beneficiary. The next step is that the trustee will have to report the transaction to the authority. And eventually, the trustee will deregister the trust from the authority's record. And another point to consider is that the trustee will have to ensure that all taxes are paid. So that would involve immovable property taxes. And as you have mentioned, the capital gains tax. However, this has been deferred to next year, 2027. So this is the whole picture of how a trust, an exit can be done for a trust.
Noted. Thank you so much for this insight. Seems to me that the trust deed is key, as I mentioned previously as well. So, for the audience who are looking to put in place such a structure, please reach out to appropriate advisors in order to make sure that your trust deed is not, watered down by other risks that could be present physically. My last question, which will be to IPS. James, in the last year, in the last few years, we've seen COVID and other developments globally, which has caused the economy to shrink a bit. There's been a lot of buzzwords this year that 2026 is a pivot year or a reset year for Cambodian property market. Would you agree with this? Are we seeing a price stabilization, or would you say that Cambodia is still in a correction phase in terms of the real estate?
Yeah, it's a very good question and something obviously we hear a lot about. I think we are reaching stabilization as here on the ground. We are definitely witnessing a real boost in demand this year, and we're seeing a lot more confidence from the various players in the sector, whether it's developers, banks, or investors as well. So as of, just to give a little background on that, as of 2026, we can see that the overall prices have lowered in the real estate market around between 20 and 40% compared to the booming pre-COVID period. Let's say it was at its peak between 2018 to 2022. That's when the prices were really at their highest. I should note, though, that this statement relates more so to built properties in terms of projects, resales, more so than it does to prime land plots here in the city. Because especially in high commercial and residential districts, we've seen that the land prices here in Phnom Penh have really weathered the storm, and they remain very high, if not higher than before. And I think this shows the confidence of the owners that prime positions in a city like this, with such strong growth, will remain highly valued in coming years. But the price correction that we have seen in the project space followed a period of intense FDI from trade and development partners, especially China, who was certainly the main driver in the peak period, and a lesser extent to other Asian and global investors who entered the market in force leading up to COVID. Strong capital flows were entering the market, between 2016 to 2021, and these were driven by large investments in the gaming casino sector, industrial sector, manufacturing, of course, and huge investment into the real estate sector across all segments. We also saw huge infrastructural improvements and logistics developments during this growth period, again, largely fueled by FDI from Chinese and other major donor support. So during that period too, consumer and corporate lending was at historic levels, and the local housing sector and the condo sector grew dramatically alongside access to capital by the local market. However, following the boom period, with the onset of the COVID travel restrictions and an increase in control over Chinese outward capital flows by the Chinese government, the bubble in the Cambodian real estate sector essentially popped. And in the years 2022 through 2024 that followed, we saw far lower demand than previous years, leading investors to take a step back and cooling the market activity. This led to the drop in prices that we've experienced from 2022 until 2025. Compared to 2024 and early 2025, however, as of 2026, we are also witnessing increasing demand in the market, and this demand is driving confidence of developers in the market to launch new projects. Hence, in 2026 and in late 2025, we're actually seeing more new project launches in terms of both high-rise and landed projects than we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years put together. These projects are also selling very quickly, something I mentioned earlier, with the uptake of entire buildings or projects in less than 6 to 8 month sales cycles. The profile of investors is also changing a lot compared to 5 or 6 years ago, and they appear more savvy and cautious than before, naturally. For instance, we're seeing more investments from regions such as Eastern Europe and Russia due to probably political uncertainties in their own countries. The same in regard to Middle Eastern investors entering the Cambodian market. And certainly from what we've seen in the last few weeks, we only see this trend continuing. European, American, Australasian buyers, they have always been active in Cambodia. However, we're seeing they're increasingly targeting Southeast Asian destinations for both investment and relocation. And being from Australasia myself, I know that this is due to cost of living concerns and political shifts in their own countries and a growing lack of economic opportunities. Chinese investors remain a key demographic in Cambodia, but less concentrated than in previous years and less concentrated in the condominium sector. We see a lot more Chinese buying through trust holding landed properties, and I think this is due to a downturn in the Chinese condo market is making them more cautious in the Cambodian market. Korean and Japanese investors, who again have always been very focused on Cambodia for the last several decades, continue to target Cambodia for industrial and residential investments. New launches in the market recently are also increasingly targeting foreign and local buyers, with price and payment terms able to be accessed by local buyers as well as foreign investors. This is a very good point for incoming buyers in 2026 because it means that the products they purchase are much more suitable to rentals and resales to local buyers. And given the way that the Cambodian population is growing and the incomes are growing, this means a stronger outlook in terms of a resale value. Before COVID, however, we mainly saw developers targeting the low-hanging fruit in terms of the higher-priced assets targeting the foreign investors. We also saw a lot of developers offering a guaranteed rental structure to investors to aid them to come into the market. However, as time goes on, we realize that these returns promised were overinflated. Hence, 2026 does reflect a pivot year in the Cambodian real estate market. We're seeing increasing demand, confidence from investors, developers, and financiers, however, with lower prices than previously seen. And as we see it, prices more in tune with the assets' value in terms of rental income and cap gain. Hence, investments appear more attractive to buyers seeking clear and consistent yields comparative to entry price levels. It reflects a good opportunity for buyers to enter the market and see significant gains in the coming years as the market demand continues to grow. Thanks, man.
Thank you, James. Thank you so much for your insights. That being said, we have come to the end of the fireside chat session. However, we will open the floor up to any queries from the audience. We see that there's a couple already inputted, so I may choose some of them. Okay, the first question, I think, Khine has already answered over Zoom, but I think it's an excellent question. Thank you so much for it. Perhaps, Khine, you can reiterate it over Zoom so that everyone else can hear it. The question is as follows. When it comes to holding company structure within the region, are there double tax treaties within the region, and how enforceable are they from your experience?
Sure. So I think when we're talking about double tax treaty, it's always two sides to it, right? Which are the two countries you're looking at? So obviously Cambodia is probably one of them that you're looking at. And then on the other hand, which is the company or country that you're looking to set up your structure in. So in the region, of course, Singapore itself has entered into a number of different DTAs with a number of different countries, and that obviously gives advantages and incentives for a company that is considered as being tax resident in Singapore. So just to clarify, if you set up a company in Singapore, it doesn't automatically mean that you are a tax resident in Singapore. Ultimately, it's a question of where do you exercise the control and management of that particular company. And if it is in fact exercised in Singapore, it will be considered as being tax resident in Singapore. So we look at things like where is the board of directors typically resident in, because they are the decision makers of the company, right? And where do they typically hold their board meetings? Where do they have physical meetings? Because all that forms a part of where is the control and management coming from. And as you can imagine, it might be periodic changes also, right? Because in 1 year, you could be tax resident in Singapore, but the following year, if these things are no longer relevant for your purposes of business operations, then maybe it might not be considered as being tax resident in Singapore. So I think that's generally the gist of it without going too deep into, tax advice, which is a separate set of discussion altogether, I'm sure. Yeah.
Probably on this particular question, I would like to also add on as well, given Khine had kindly provided from Singapore aspects. I just like to share the audience that as of present, Cambodia has already put in place 12 DTAs in effect. So obviously Singapore is one of it. We have Thailand, Brunei, China, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea, Laos, Macau, and I think the latest should be the Philippines and Turkey. And I understand that currently we are still negotiating more DTAs with countries like Japan, Myanmar, Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, France, and Qatar. So these are in the pipeline as well. But obviously, like Khine already shared, whether you as an investor from these jurisdictions that already have DTA in place with Cambodia are actually eligible to this DTA or not, it depends on a specific law of these countries, whether you are considered as their tax resident or not, right? And another point to note as well is that even though Cambodia already have in place all these DTA, it does not necessarily mean that the reduced tax under the DTA applied automatically. Okay, so you will have to make a request to the competent tax authority and provide justifications and get their approval as well before you can apply this reduced tax scheme. Yep.
Thank you, Nora. I think it's very good to hear about the deepening ties with Cambodia and some of the regional players as investments originate from such countries. See a lot of questions on the transaction cycle and how it's carried out. We don't want to go too much into the due diligence parts or the exit parts because we've already covered that. So perhaps let me segment these questions to perhaps James and Navinth. Let's say, how can a foreigner purchase a property in Cambodia and what kind of payment method is required? In this regard, can foreigners open a bank account in Cambodia to facilitate payment? What sort of documentations would they need? And do they need to be physically here in Cambodia?
Yeah, very good. So maybe I cover briefly, and then Navin can fill in any gaps there. In terms of purchasing a property in Cambodia, the buyer does not need to be in Cambodia whatsoever. They don't need to have an active Cambodian visa, for example. The transaction throughout can be done from abroad, using a lawyer to oversee the process and sending documents back and forward. Navin can expand a little bit more on that, maybe. In terms of starting a bank account, however, the buyer does need to be in Cambodia. However, it can be a very quick and easy process, especially if they have a signed SBA. It can be opened very quickly. Otherwise, they need a 6-month visa in Cambodia to open a bank account. Would you like to expand a little bit on that, Navin?
Yeah, perhaps to frame the question a little bit better for Navinth, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about some of the legal documentation that would be required from your end if you were appointed as counsel to facilitate the transaction for a foreigner who's not resident in Cambodia.
Okay, so to your question, Min. So if we were to facilitate a transaction for foreigners who's not present in Cambodia, first of all, we would definitely need a power of attorney signed. So the investor himself has to give us the power to carry out, to represent him in the property transaction.
Thank you. One of the questions that is burning in my mind, because someone talked about what payment methods are available. So I want to touch a little bit more on financing as well. Perhaps, James, you could tell us a little bit more on the financing options available in Cambodia, and also whether they are forwarded to foreigners.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's a question that we get a lot. However, in short, no, it's very difficult for foreigners to get financing within Cambodia. However, there are a few exceptions to the rule. Generally, the easiest option is developer finance. So there's a lot of projects that offer shorter payments during the construction cycle. So there might be a deposit of 10% and then a payment of, say, 50% during the construction cycle, which might be 36 to 45 months, depending on the build. And then there'll be a handover amount, which the developer can then extend to, say, 5 or 10-year loan with interest. So there's a lot of projects offering structures like this, which allows the buyer to pay installments over time and have much lower upfront capital liquidity. And it's very common. And it's also being applied to the local market to allow them to pay off over time. In the case of a foreigner looking to take a loan on a property they have already, so let's say you bought a condo and now you have the hard title in your name, there are a few banks now who are starting to offer finance on those titles. However, you'll need to be based in Cambodia, you'll need to have a working history, or alternatively, you'll need to have a partner here who's involved in the loan as well. So yes, there are some finance mechanisms, but it's not easy to get a mortgage from a bank in Cambodia as a foreigner currently. That being said, though, we do work with a few projects. For example, Hsu recently mentioned the Diamond Bay Garden by ICIC. ICIC is the conglomerate which holds Canada Bank, for example. They offer financing up to 90% for foreigners within their projects. So there are a few exceptions due to the reputation of the developer and the ability for them to finance foreigners. And I think it's something we're going to see a lot more moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, James. I see that Nora would like to answer a question, but before I get to you, just to move on to Khine a little bit about financing options for a holdco in Singapore, perhaps.
Yeah, so I think when we are talking about financing, of course, there are both local banks as well as international banks available in Singapore. The first step would really be for you to reach out to the bank and speak with them in terms of your business plans, because I think they will be looking at more from the perspective of what's your business plan, right? Not just the fact that you want to acquire a property. Of course, financing for purchase of property in Singapore, yes, obviously very straightforward with Singapore banks. But if you're talking about financing a transaction for acquisition offshore, then there may be certain requirements that each of the bank has in place, depending on their internal policies, including, of course, their own KYC checks as well. But more importantly, the relationship manager that you have with the bank needs certain information from you in order for him or her to go to the bank and tell them, okay, is this something that the bank might be willing to consider? And if so, obviously, what's the rate? What are the T's and C's, right? So in order for them to do that, the key information they will require is really your business plan. And that would really be the first step that would get you into the bank first. Yeah. Of course, if you're already a banking customer with some of these banks, you could naturally reach out to your existing RM and speak with them about exploring these opportunities. But if you haven't, and if you're not an existing customer with them, naturally you can appreciate that there might be further KYC questions that are being asked by the bank.
Thank you, Kai. Very insightful. Perhaps, Nora, would you like to answer the question on payment methods?
Yeah, definitely. I think since we are on the topics of financings and payment, I see questions from one of our audience asking about what payment methods available for foreign buyers. I believe our speaker here have already covered on the financing options, whether financing onshore, financing offshores. Probably what I would like to add on a little bit is on the payment method itself. Obviously, Cambodia is very cash-driven economy and most importantly, US dollar-based economy. But for AML reasons, obviously, a payment in cash is not strongly recommended anymore, especially for a large scale transaction as acquiring property, right? Because we're talking about a lot of cash involved. So definitely a payment through licensed intermediary, basically it's just a licensed bank in Cambodia would be recommended. And as you also be aware as well, Cambodia does not have foreign exchange control, right? So we don't really need the approval from the central banks to move money in and out. But definitely, if you are looking to acquire property in Cambodia and you want to move your money from offshore, you obviously need to get your authorities' approval from the home country first, right? In order to move the money out of your country. But when the money coming in, like I said, we don't need central bank approval, but obviously you will need to be able to answer to your banks that receive the money as to what's the purpose of the money coming in. So probably, definitely, you'll have to answer some questions and provide some documents as proof to the bankers. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nora. Very good point on citing documents from the corresponding country. I think our Myanmar audience in the seminar can appreciate some of the capital controls imposed by some governments. So this is definitely a point to check. It's not the end destination that's only important. It's also the departure destination, and the controls must be fulfilled. With that being said, I think we are running out of time. And would like to express my thanks to everyone involved, the IPS team, my colleagues from Rajah Tann, and also the audience for your patience. I hope you guys had a good seminar and hope you learned a lot from this discussion and the speaker sessions earlier today. With that being said, over to you, Moni.
Okay, thank you so much, Min. As we come to the end of today's webinar, we would like to thank all of our speakers for sharing their valuable insights and expertise, and to the audience who joined us today for your time and for your participation. We hope today's discussion has provided you with a clearer understanding of Cambodia's investment landscape, the legal framework for foreign investors, and the opportunities within the country's real estate sector. So thank you once again for joining us. We look forward to continuing continuing the conversation with you outside of this during our one-on-one consultations that I've mentioned earlier, but also in the future as well. So on behalf of IPS Cambodia, in collaboration with Rajah Tann Asia, I would like to thank you sincerely for your time here today with us. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.